On a Monday afternoon in 1998, a 9-year veteran of the Los Angeles Police Department strolled into the vast property division evidence room at the downtown headquarters. The officer's name was Rafael Rey Perez, and he was wearing a disguise. A 5-day-old beard and mustache covered the lower half of his face. He wore his wife's thick reading glasses, and a baseball cap was pulled low on his head. At the counter, Perez gave the property officer a folder with a booking number, telling her that he needed the evidence for the case. Without checking his ID, she quickly retrieved a taped and sealed cardboard evidence box and allowed him to sign for it. Perez scrawled the name of another cop, Joel Perez, and a fake badge number before leaving with the evidence. 20 minutes later, Perez parked his SUV near a strip mall. He ran over to a nearby store and purchased a box of Bisquick baking mix. He returned to his SUV and finally opened the evidence box. Inside were 3 kilos of cocaine with an estimated street value of $800,000. Just like he had done twice previously when stealing coke from evidence to sell, Perez swapped Bisquick for the drugs. On both occasions, he had been able to reseal the evidence bags full of baking mix and return them without issue. Typically, coke was never retested, and this evidence was involved in a case that wasn't going to trial. Sooner or later, the coke would be destroyed, forever hiding the evidence of his illegal substitution. But today was different. Maybe Perez had a premonition or it was paranoia, but he ended up dumping the bags full of baking mix and the empty evidence box into a nearby storm drain instead of trying to swap the fake drugs back into the property room. But it was too late. His audacious theft was already another link in a chain of events that would end in the exposure of the widespread police corruption in the LAPD's Rampart Division Anti-Gang Crash Unit. Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums, or CRASH, was started in the 1970s to combat gangs in South Central LA. In response to the drug-fueled violence of the 1980s, the LAPD heavily funded CRASH and established other divisions throughout the city for a total of 18 units. The elite teams of officers worked out of their own substations, often wore plain clothes, and made undercover drug buys. The unspoken rule at CRASH was that a prospective member needed to be invited to join by a sponsor on the team. Crash divisions were tight-knit families separate from the other cops. Their mission was to take out gangs through just about any means necessary. The Rampart Crash Unit pushed this idea to the max and were known for being a law unto themselves. Rampart Crash served Pico Union, a dense poverty-stricken neighborhood full of immigrants, both legal and undocumented, located just west of LA's downtown skyscrapers. Though Pico Union is only about 8 square miles, during the late 1990s, the area had upwards of 30 different gangs, including 18th Street and MS-13. Rampart Crash had a reputation for being dirty, but after bad interactions with officers, few residents dared to come forward. Many were scared of the cops, spoke little to no English, or were involved in illegal activities themselves. The complaints of the few residents that spoke out against the unit didn't go anywhere. After the coke went missing, Internal Affairs, or IA, investigated Officer Joel Perez, who had allegedly checked out the drugs. They quickly discounted him. When IA went through property division records, the log showed that Rampart Crash Officer Rey Perez had previously checked out a large amount of coke. Meanwhile, IA was already investigating Rampart Crash for the brutal beating of a suspect and a couple of bad shootings. Also, 3 months before Perez's theft of the coke, his close friend and former partner David Mack had been arrested for a brazen bank heist of $722,000 in cash. As of yet, investigators hadn't been able to identify David's co-conspirators who helped him rob the bank. However, they suspected Perez and a third cop. Curiously, in one way or another, Perez was involved in or linked to all of these events. Worried that they had a couple of rogue cops in Rampart, the LAPD created a task force made up of detectives and prosecutors from the DA's office. They quickly put Perez under surveillance. They tapped his phone, parked a van outside his house, and on at least one occasion followed his SUV via helicopter. The task force discovered that Perez and his wife drove expensive vehicles and had an upper-middle-class lifestyle that would be hard to achieve on a policeman's pay. Also, Perez had called his girlfriend, a known, sometimes cocaine dealer and informant, twice on the day of the coke theft, once before and once after. In August of 1998, the LAPD arrested Perez for the coke theft. In December of '98, he went to trial. Perez was a charismatic storyteller who managed to enthrall several members of the jury. His case ended 8-4 in a hung jury. Perez remained in custody. The police task force went back to work to try to build a stronger case against him. Their research turned up the fact that drugs had gone missing from evidence before. There were 11 transfers with suspicious paperwork. 6 of the drug evidence packages had already been destroyed, but they tested the remaining 5. All were Bisquick. Perez had been stealing from the evidence room on and off for years. The newly discovered thefts bumped up the charge against Perez to a felony. Rather than go to trial again, Perez had his attorney reach out to Richard Rosenthal, a deputy district attorney who was on the task force and overseeing prosecution. Perez was willing to confess to a crime, the shooting of an unarmed suspect, and the planting of a gun on him if he were granted immunity on the charge and a reduced 5-year term on the drug charges. In exchange, Perez would spill the beans on dirty cops in the Rampart Division crash. The deal was approved. Perez was secretly transported from jail to an office in the headquarters of the county transit system to meet with the task force. Worried about threats to Perez's life, the authorities didn't want to meet in a police building. What Perez said stunned the room. He'd been dirty since his very first drug bust as a crash officer in 1995. He regularly kept some of the money he seized during busts. Then Perez told the LAPD of the time he shot Javier Ovando. On the night of October 13, 1996, Perez and his partner Nino Durden went to a boarded-up apartment building for a surveillance stakeout. They found 2 homeless guys crashing in one of the apartments, Nene and 19-year-old Javier Ovando, a member of the notorious 18th Street Gang. Durden and Perez were especially unhappy to see Ovando. They'd thrown him out of the building the night before. They handcuffed the 2 men and hustled them into Unit 407, their stakeout apartment. Perez unshackled Nene, telling the men that he was sending them out one at a time. Nene left immediately. However, Perez and Durden didn't let Ovando leave. They started interrogating him. When he protested, refusing to offer up any information, Perez suddenly pulled out his Beretta and shot him in the chest at close range. Durden quickly did the same. Then Perez lifted Ovando off the floor by the front of his shirt and fired a round into the side of his head. Perez called for assistance using Rampart Crash's secret radio code for a dirty shooting. The code was a demand for other crash officers in the know to keep outside supervisors away. By the time anyone else arrived at the scene, Perez and Durden had positioned a loaded, chopped-down Tech-22 semi-automatic by Ovando's body. Durden had previously filed the serial number off the gun. Once the sergeant arrived, unaware that they'd planted the gun, he listened to Perez's story of the shooting and helped him clean up any loose ends in the tale. According to Perez, Ovando busted into the apartment, brandishing his gun with intent to kill. They shot him out of self-defense. Miraculously, Ovando survived the shooting, although he was left paralyzed and wheelchair-bound for the rest of his life. When he was somewhat recovered, he stood trial. Based on Perez's and Durden's false testimony, Ovando was found guilty of 2 counts of assaulting a police officer with a semi-automatic rifle and 1 count of brandishing it in the presence of a police officer. He received the maximum sentence, 23 years in state prison. Perez's confession about Ovando's shooting was just the beginning. He claimed that 90% of all crash officers, not just Rampart Crash, falsified information. He also talked about dirty busts. Perez's revelations sent the LAPD reeling. How many people were sitting in jail for crimes they didn't commit, or their investigation was handled by corrupt cops? Perez's first debriefing session was 3 hours, and there was the promise of more secrets to be divulged. On behalf of the DA's office, the horrified Rosenthal took the unusual step for prosecution and filed a writ of habeas corpus overturning Ovando's conviction. Within a week of Perez's confession, Ovando was freed from prison. He had served 2.5 years in jail. Over the course of 52 secret interrogations lasting 9 months, Perez laid bare the corrupt culture and transgressions of the Rampart Crash Division. He discussed how the majority of crash officers were unscrupulous. They knowingly framed civilians, sometimes with drop guns like the one he and Durden planted on Ovando, perjured themselves on the witness stand, and were purposefully slow in calling for medical attention, allowing injured suspects to suffer longer. Some officers drank or took drugs on the job. They also awarded each other plaques for shooting people, with extra honors if the person killed was a suspect. Perez told the task force the unofficial crash motto, "We intimidate those who intimidate others." Early on, Perez had asked the task force if he could see the crash recap books, logs of all activities undertaken by the unit, to refresh his memories. Perez received 1,509 arrest reports and identified 91 arrests involving 160 suspects with alleged police misconduct. Of those 91 dirty arrests, Perez was involved in 63, of which 44 involved Perez and his partner Durden. Perez also provided details on a cop-on-cop shooting and a brutality incident where Rampart Crash Officer Brian Hewitt brought Ismael Jimenez, a member of the 18th Street Gang, into the station for questioning. During interrogation, Hewitt secretly beat the handcuffed Jimenez. However, Perez refused to provide information on David Mack, whom by now had been convicted and was serving a 14-year sentence for his bank robbery. Nor would Perez admit to being one of the robbers, and he had no idea where the loot from the bank robbery ended up. As of 2020, the stolen money has never been recovered. Allegedly, the money was intended to be used to pay off an assassin for carrying out the murder of Biggie Smalls. Reputedly, Perez and Mack were involved in the planning of the famed rapper's murder too. Meanwhile, investigators scrambled to try to corroborate the information Perez had been provided. Detectives visited several prisons to talk to inmates and even made a trip to a village in Central America to speak to a wronged party. Ultimately, Perez pointed a finger at over 70 officers for misconduct. Investigations found enough evidence to bring 58 of those officers before an internal administrative board. However, only 24 were actually found to have committed any wrongdoing. 12 cops were given suspensions, 7 were forced into resignation or retirement, and 5 were fired. Based on falsified evidence and police perjury inquiries, 106 prior criminal convictions were overturned. There were over 140 civil lawsuits against the city of Los Angeles, which cost the city an estimated $125 million in settlements. On November 21, 2000, Javier Ovando received a $15 million settlement, the largest police misconduct settlement in Los Angeles history, and possibly U.S. history. Ray Perez and Nino Durden were the only cops who wound up doing any real prison time for the Rampart scandal. In accordance with his immunity agreement, Perez was sentenced to 5 years for stealing cocaine from LAPD evidence. He was paroled early. However, 2 federal charges were brought against him. Number 1, conspiracy to violate Ovando's civil rights, and number 2, possessing a firearm with an eliminated serial number, the drop gun used to frame Ovando. He was sentenced to serve 2 years in a federal prison. Durden ended up being sentenced to 5 years in prison after being convicted on 6 counts, including conspiracy to obstruct justice, perjury, and filing false reports. In the fall of '99, LAPD Chief Bernard Parks created a board of inquiry to review management failure and probe the depth of the corruption scandal. About 6 months later, the board released a report which mainly blamed a few bad apples and mediocre departmental management for allowing misconduct within the Rampart division to occur. The report also offered recommendations for improvement in several areas, including police training and supervisory oversight. The LAPD experienced a great deal of inner turmoil. Many cops felt like Chief Parks closed down the investigation too quickly. He quashed lines of inquiry into corrupt cops tied to the Bloods and other criminal enterprises. He also refused to grant immunity to officers who'd witnessed and failed to report misconduct. That choice quelled any impulses of low-level officers to come forward about wrongdoing they might have seen with upper management. Lastly, Park limited the probe to Rampart crash instead of instituting a wider investigation of all crash units, even though during the interrogation Perez and later Durden brought up misconduct happening in the 77th Street Crash Division. Other cops felt like Ray Perez played the LAPD for fools, feeding them exaggerated tales of police wrongdoing with little truth mixed in. Crash was disbanded in 2000 and replaced by the LAPD Gang and Narcotics Division. Several crimes involving Rampart crash officers remain unsolved. The full truth may never be known about what is probably the worst corruption scandal in the LAPD's 151-year history. And now that you reached the end of our video, why not keep the watch party going? How accurate are TV cop shows? Could they be teaching criminals how to get away with crimes? Go here to find out. Ever heard of the insane World War II sea battle involving potatoes? Check it out here.